we're going to be able to talk about the Black Lives Matter meeting that happened in Lansing yesterday.
We really don't want to be diverse. We want the appearance of diversity, but stuck in the same old system of structure.
There was one perfect martyr. There was one. And everyone else has fallen incredibly short of that.
He is recording me and threatening myself and my dog.
Yeah, she knew that by calling the police and saying an African-American man is threatening me.
Reform the police, defund the police, or abolish the police.
I don't hold it against every single individual cop. I have friends that are police officers and I love them to death. But the paradigm that they live in is just not accountable enough.
How many times has a police been called by somebody who was white on somebody who was black or minority, and they act like they are in distress, and the police show up and they take me away, or someone who looks like me, because of a phone call?
Diversity without shared power is tokenism. And one of the first things she says, I'm really not a racist.
I sort of think we're in a Hunger Games kind of experience. If you are white, you are living in Pan Am, and you're living in District 1, and the whole system is working for you. And if you are a person of color, then you're in one of the other districts, and the system needs to be torn down and totally rebuilt. So this is a classic white mistake, and I don't know, like, Kurt, I feel like I'm doing a lot of talking. Kurt, do you want to explain the mistake for white people saying I'm not a racist?
Well, that's a good question. And now I feel like Andy Shore, I'm on the spot.
But I feel like that's a lot of people. A lot of people spew out a lot of racist things, but they're like, I'm not a racist.
Racism, as the four of us have defined it, a good definition is prejudice plus power. Who determines George Floyd's value? Jesus did. Bought him with his blood.
Amen.
He determined his value.
The litmus test for white, willingness to change is submitting to black leadership.
Cut the military tanks. We don't need those. No problem. Defunding, but it's not as simple as just let's give 150,000 less.
But the police, they police from a perspective and a vantage point that is ancient, archaic, and old. And I say that because it's systemically racist, and we continue to see that.
And if there's not a time when the iron is hot, right now is it. This is why I love talking with you three, is because Coy, you and Luis, I mean, I've heard everything Kurt said. but you two just brought up some stuff that I haven't thought about before. If you're watching this and you haven't joined our group, Core in Lansing, please do so right now, because that's how we're in this for the long haul. They cry peace, peace when there is no peace. I'm Tom Arthur, and I'm the pastor of Sycamore Creek. And if you are watching right now, give us a shout out in the comments section and share this video out on all of your pages. Come on, do it right now. Right now. It's easy. Just hit that share button. You can do it. Come on. Let's see those shares go up. Let's see the comments coming in. Feel free to drop some questions in there too. I'm sure there's going to be lots of questions tonight. Lots and lots and lots of questions. Kurt's probably going to have a lot of meetings later this week that he's going to have. While you're at it, like the congregation's Organizing for Racial Reconciliation page to keep up to date about the movement of anti-racist churches that is growing in Lansing. Hey, you guys want to introduce yourselves, unmute yourself, and let everybody who's watching and listening know who you are. Coy?
Pastor Coy Boyer, Kingdom Life Church here in Lansing, Michigan.
Woo woo for Coy.
There you go.
Right. Kingdom Life. I'm okay.
Boy, is your
Pastor,
wife on yet?
I don't know if she's on just yet, but I'm sure if we keep talking,
I am
she'll
looking
drop a
forward
comment.
to Katura's comments through this entire episode.
Gotcha.
Because she'll fix everything we're saying. It'll be right.
that's right. That'd be good. So I'm
Kurt, you
Pastor
and my
Kurt.
wife don't actually join in.
I know. They're silent observers. I don't know. But yeah, Pastor Kurt Wright, Crossroads Church of Lansing.
All right. We're so excited that you all are here for this episode. You may notice that there are only 3 of us tonight.
I miss you, Luis.
Luis.
Yep.
It's not the same.
So Luis isn't able to join us through this run of episodes in October, but we thought that it was such an important topic that we still wanted to meet. Partly, this is like our own opportunity to process stuff. So,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's true. True.
We've done a little bit of processing behind the scenes, but even though Luis can't join us, the 3 of us wanted the space to process, and this whole perspectives thing gives us the chance to process out loud. Because tonight we're talking about politics and race. Are you sure you guys are ready for this?
Are you? Can you ever be ready for this? I think the only person ready for this was Jesus.
Whoa. Bring in the pastoral perspective right off the bat.
Right off the bat.
As if talking politics is not hard enough. How do you talk politics tonight with somebody who is saying racist stuff? That's never happened to me. Has that happened to you guys?
Yes. Every comment and problem presents an opportunity, Tom.
All right.
Look at that. Look at that spiritual answer.
That's a good perspective. We'll see if we still have it by the end of this hour. So the other thing I love about this, I just like listening to Coy laugh at things I say. My church doesn't ever laugh at stuff I say, but Coy,
Me too.
Coy's very entertained by me.
It's the bandana on your head. I'm not sure if you are a hippie or a blood. I'm just trying to figure that out, right?
It's my Axl Rose look. I'm trying to look like, I guess, a white supremacist tonight, but
Is that what you're looking like?
But spout anti-racist things. So I'm just trying to confuse people.
Well, I don't have no cornrows and baggy pants on, just in case you were wondering. So
okay. Well, I'd like to see that version of you.
You know what? You and a lot of other people would like to see that version of me.
So before we get to what we're here to talk about tonight, there's like so many news headlines that have happened that we can't neglect, like at least bring in a little bit of pastoral sensitivity to some of them, particularly as they intersect with the issue of race, because that's what we're here. That's what perspective is about. 4 perspectives.
Yeah.
I guess, it's 3 perspectives tonight. We're a little less diverse. We're missing the Puerto Rican perspective, which we really miss. But so this, all right, if you're watching, do we have anybody actually watching? Yeah, we do. Look at all those people. That's kind of cool. If you're watching, this is what we're calling a lightning round, which the whole point of it is 30 seconds, like lightning response to each of these headlines, because we feel like, well, actually, Kurt, you said it really well. Why don't you explain why we're doing this?
Yeah, this is a pastoral reflection. There's not many times where you get 3 pastors that we know each other, love each other, trust each other. And sometimes I'll see the headline and I'm kind of playing around in my head with it. And it's not always what I'm going to preach about this upcoming Sunday. It's too many topics. So like, what's a thoughtful 3 or 4 sentence, like heart reaction to these headlines?
All right. So here we go. First headline. Today is Indigenous Peoples Day. Kurt?
Yeah, so I live on Wright Road. My last name is Wright. That is not a coincidence. My family has lived on the same property from before the Civil War.
I had no idea.
Wow.
There's
Are you
much.
serious?
I'm serious. There's much privilege in that. Much privilege. In my, we have like a history book of our family, another privilege. In part of kind of like this collection of things we have includes Native American arrowheads. And so probably in the 1820s, many Native people were moved out of Michigan. My family probably European descent showed up here around 1850. We don't know exactly. So what happened in that 30, 40 years is crazy. So I really am in tune, maybe not as much should be, but I think about that. I think about that a lot. And but here's the thing I want to challenge everybody. You know, we all live on native ground. Not just not me, because my ancestry goes back further. We all do. That's my thought.
So I think back to a series we did last spring called Forgive Us. And each week we asked for forgiveness. We confessed and repented, hopefully, of some of our issues. We asked different groups of people to forgive us. One of them was Indigenous Peoples. It was the hardest sermon to write because the history is so depressing. The doctrine of discovery, if you don't know about that, you got to look it up. This was the Christian doctrine that allowed Christians to take lands and claim them from people who were not considered Christians. Ultimately saying that if you were not a follower of Jesus, you had less worth than one who was a follower of Jesus. I think that the whole idea of Europeans discovering America is really challenged more by kind of the reality of a European invasion of North America. And in the process, Christians appropriated the story of Israel as America's story, which is a serious theological and biblical problem. In the 1400s, there were 500 million natives in North America, and by the 1800s, there were 600,000.
Wow.
That's 4.4 million Native Americans dead. I don't know what to call that but a genocide. All right, Coy.
You know, I didn't hear about Indigenous People Day until a few minutes before we got on here because you guys told me about it. And I'm kind of lost for words. So I'm going to say I agree with both of what you guys said.
All right.
Can I do that?
That was the shortest
Yes,
commentary by Coy in the history of this whole Perspectives episode. He just agreed with the two
I feel
white
like
guys.
my oldest son does when he doesn't have an answer for you. I have nothing for you. That's what he does.
All right. All right, so headline number 2, the Breonna Taylor court case. We haven't met since we talked about that. Coy, you probably got something to actually say about this one. 30
I
seconds.
got a lot to say. 30 seconds. So 30
Lightning
seconds.
round.
So initially I was just kind of what happened is what I expected. No type of charges being brought. Everything is just fine. And so that bothered me, but I knew it was going to happen. And so when it happened, it did kind of hurt, even though I knew it was coming. And initially I was kind of really frustrated, but then I did do some more research. And initially I thought that they actually went into the house, the officers did, and they went to the bedroom and they shot Breonna Taylor. I didn't understand that, they shot through the apartment and she was killed in her bed. So I got some mixed feelings about that. Obviously, I think it was an injustice. They were at the wrong place. Innocent person does die. I think they need to do a better job at acknowledging the fact that she was innocent and that the police missed it. They made a mistake. So that way we can get away from, all of the other surrounding things about, the boyfriend shot in through the door and then they shot back. All of that stuff makes sense once you start shooting. But the fact that they were at the wrong place and an innocent person died, the fact that the one officer was actually got in trouble because his stray bullet went into a side apartment where some innocent person could have died. All of those things need to actually be dealt with in a manner where you constantly are reminded of the fact, wrong place, innocent person died, has to be a consequence. That was 38 seconds.
Wow.
That's good. Wow.
All right. So I'd say what I've learned is that it's really easy for me as a white person to empathize with white police. They got a hard job to do. And Chris Rock says there are some professions that can't afford even one bad apple. But I've tried to really spend the last several years, especially since Ferguson, trying to live inside of and empathize with the Black community. And from that perspective, the system of policing is at least flawed and the foundation, and it needs reforming. And at the worst is antagonistic to the Black community and needs entirely to be rethought and reimagined. If this was an isolated situation, I think it would look different, but because it fits in a larger pattern of police abusing their power, sometimes intentionally, sometimes unintentionally, and not being held accountable, it plays into a larger narrative of systemic racism.
You know, I love what you said about sometimes intentionally, sometimes unintentionally, because I think sometimes, depending on what side you're on, you either always say it's unintentional or you always say it's intentional. And the reality of it is both do exist. But you're right, something needs to be done. Regardless,
I always say unintentional racism is still racism.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
All right, Kurt, Breonna Taylor.
It's sad that we argue about our point of view so quickly without having any season of like sadness or heartbreak. People go right to like, oh well, they had reason, or the judge signed off on the warrants, but she died.
Yeah.
But she died, and she didn't do anything wrong. So, I don't always know what to say, but I definitely know what not to say. And what not to say is, but, like, whoa, just right. She died, and that should break our hearts. And so it's frustrating that there's not a compassionate response, a lament. I keep saying that. And then my next thought would be, I just do wonder, like systemically, how many judges write warrants for these kind of, midnight, go into the house, knock the door down kind of thing if you need to, in a rural or suburban area compared to a city area. And
that's a great question.
That's a great question.
The judge wrote this. He gave the okay. He had to say, yes, I'm issuing this warrant or whatever it is. Maybe it's not a warrant, but it was way above these police officers that went and did what they did. And I don't think that's getting talked about enough. That's the system part. There's a system here that's going on that's not right.
Thanks for bringing that to our attention.
Yeah.
All right. These next three headlines, we can knock these out really quick. Okay. Lightning round. Stand back and stand by. I've been listening to, I've been trying to diversify my media and listening to more right side of the media. And they're all up in arms about the media's response to that. I don't need the media. I watched him and listened to him say it. At the least, Trump is exceedingly careless with his words, and he's intentionally divisive and harmful. That's it. Kurt?
It should be easy for the leader of the United States of America to just quickly, calmly, with such precision to say, I condemn white supremacy. That's just not too much to ask. The dodging and all of this, and it was like, I went back and listened to the clip, and they're like, well, just say it. And then Donald Trump is saying, well, who do you want me to condemn? What do you want me to say? And then that's when the Proud Boys gets brought up, and then he's, but it's not complicated. It's sad that politics is like, if I name white supremacy, there could be a block of voters that I lose. And that right there is what's wrong with politics. Yeah, I'm definitely not saying everything from the Republican view is wrong. I support many Republican perspectives, but there's no excuse for, that's a softball question, man. Or a T-ball, it's teed up. You should smash it.
That's great. I've never heard it's not just a softball, it's a T-ball question. Coy?
All right, for me, I really hesitate saying anything negative against any president, regardless of who they are, especially on a platform like this where everybody can hear it. But I will say this, and that is what President Trump has shown me throughout his time in office, and what he showed me in that moment was that he is loyal to one person, and that is himself. And if someone is willing to be loyal or committed to him or support him, he's not really going to say something against them or specifically condemn them, because that means he'll be like going against himself. He'd be going against people who are going to support him. And so I have just found that President Trump, he just really often appears like he's loyal to one person, himself. And that comment demonstrated that to me.
Yeah. I see lots of people commenting. I'd love for you out. Keep commenting. We'll put some questions in there. We'll get to them later on. We also would love for you to share out right now. So if you haven't shared this yet, share it on your page. That's a real simple thing to do to help continue to build this movement of anti-racist churches. All right, Trump gets COVID. That's the headline. I was praying for transformation and humbling. My prayer doesn't seem to have been answered. That would have been like a spectacular, like Saul of Tarsus to Paul. Like,
you listen, you guys do not sound like apolitical pastors tonight. I just want to go on record saying
I already said I support many Republican views. I'm serious. I really do. I'm just saying his comment was wrong.
We're talking race and politics tonight. Come on. All right, okay. Here's the apolitical part of this comment. Trump has the best medical attention in the world. What would happen if those medical resources were equitably available to the poor and to people of color? COVID stats in Michigan. Black people have gotten COVID 18,000 per million, white people 9,000 per million. Black people have 20% of the cases in Michigan. They make up 14% of the population.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, I prayed for President Trump the very next day, got on Facebook, did a Facebook Live, and I was convicted by God's word that says, you honor the king or those who are in power. You pray for them that our lives may be quiet and peaceable. And I wouldn't wish COVID on anybody, nor do I want people to die from it. So my prayer was very much, Lord, healing. And I didn't think about the humility part. I didn't think about Lord save his soul. Like I just wanted to deal with the fact that he was sick. I wanted to get better. Now, I want to say this. I have a friend of mine. He is a cardiologist in Atlanta, Georgia. And I talked to him about COVID cases. And he said to me, what he is noticing in African Americans, this virus is actually doing more damage than many of the white people who he has treated. He said, now listen, I'm giving the same care and I'm seeing a different reaction from Black people who have it than white people who have it. Now, it could be some other things leading up to it. Maybe it's poor living conditions. Maybe, they don't have the same type of health or whatever. It could be a lot of things that could affect that. But he was saying they're in my care and I'm seeing two different effects or recovery periods as well as side effects to how bad it is based upon Black and white at times, which was crazy to me. But, he's a cardiologist. He's right in the midst of it. So.
This is why I love your wife, Keturah. She says, pray louder. All right, Kurt, 30 seconds. Trump gets COVID.
Yeah, I was also with you, Tom, as far as I was hoping this would bring about like a humility or at least a greater sense of compassion with his words. I can't his heart. I don't judge his heart. I just want to hear the words like, my heart breaks for everyone that's been lost as a result of COVID. My heart hurts for the sick. Maybe I'm hoping he'd have a pastor's heart, and maybe that's not realistic or a futile thought, but that. But it feels like it was the other, and it was like, hey, this isn't a big deal. I came out, I'm strong, and I don't know. So.
Oh, but I knew that was going to be his response. Like, that didn't surprise me at all. I told a couple of people he's going to recover from this, and he'll tell everybody, he's strong. We, just do this. Like, it's not that big of a deal. I just figured that.
All right.
Yeah.
Here's our last headline in the lightning round. I'm not sure it's been a lightning round. It's maybe been a rolling thunder round. The plot to kidnap our governor.
Oh goodness.
Am I
You know,
first?
stand back and stand by. Is that what was said, right? I guess they were done standing by. I guess it was time to move out. I'm sorry.
Oh no.
Stand down and stand by. Yeah, stand by is over. I was in shock when I heard about it. I was out of town. I was in shock. Go ahead, guys.
Kurt?
I think this points to the intense problem of nationalism. If you think the governor's response of taking away your freedom to not be able to walk in a store without a mask, or and then more intense things than that, work was shut down. I mean, hair salons were shut down. I mean, it was intense. But there's something about this nationalism view of like, you cannot tread on me. You cannot tell me what to do. If you tell me what to do, I will do anything to overcome that. I'll kidnap the governor. And that's the kind of thinking that goes into that. You take my freedom away, I'm gonna kidnap the governor. So I just think that's really, really dangerous thinking.
The only thing I'm going to add to this is MLK's statement, hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. And I think that actually is kind of what we want to talk about tonight. So now that we've gotten through the rolling thunder round, by the way, speaking of racist stuff, my alma mater, Wheaton College, when I was there, they were the Crusaders. And after I left, they rebranded themselves as the Thunder. So because you can't go to the Middle East with Crusaders t-shirts, we stuff on.
Right.
So rolling thunder. I guess I'm a thunder, a weedy thunder. All right, we don't seem to be having any problem with people commenting. Thank you all for commenting.
You want to read some of those comments, or you like
you got any that you want to bring up? I mean, Katura said, "Pray louder."
Any other ones other than my wife?
We need like a person who's just paying attention to the comments.
To the comments.
Keep the conversation going and pay attention significantly to the comments. So
I got it.
So keep commenting, share it out. Let's see, how many shares do we have right now? Actually, I can't tell for some reason. Can anybody see? All right. Anyway, if you haven't shared it out. All right. Okay. We're where we wanted to get to tonight, which is politics and race. Very specifically, how do you talk politics with somebody when they're saying something or supporting something that you think is racist? I've been thinking a lot about this, guys, because we just finished this series in our church called I Think You're Wrong, But I'm Listening. It's based on a book that we were reading by Sarah Holland and Beth Silvers, a guide to grace-filled political conversations. We spent 3 weeks in this book. We really liked that. It was a very energetic series, to say the least. And in that whole thing, here's kind of the progression that we went with. Week 1 was we should talk politics and religion. That faith does have something to say to that realm of our life together. And in that we should talk with love, and we should talk with being comfortable with being uncomfortable. So we got to raise our level of being willing to be uncomfortable in these conversations, which is a white problem, by the way. That white people are very unwilling to get uncomfortable in any kind of conversation about politics or religion or race or anything. But I kept hearing this question. If I had a pushback in this series, it was this: how do I talk to people, and sometimes family members, like a spouse or like a mother or like a sibling, when their racism, and this is sometimes the literal words, their racism disgusts and horrifies me. That's heavy, really heavy. So I have a couple of thoughts, and I'm going to share, like, each one. You all can, like, you can kind of jump in as we share. But I thought, that's a really good question. I'm going to bring it to my friends, my pastoral friends, to talk about. So you all are like my pastoral team tonight to help my people. And I guess we can help our people together have this conversation.
There you go.
And then next week, Coy, we're going to do a series that you have done through, or we're going to talk about the politics of Jesus or something like that.
Yeah. Biblical principles in politics.
Okay, there we go. Yours was much more precisely worded than mine. So here's my first counsel for talking politics and religion with somebody who's spouting things that you feel like are racist. Be careful not to miss your own racism. I say this especially to white people. It is very easy to notice racism in other people, and it is very easy to get judgmental about it. And it is very easy to miss your own racism. And this is why I think that what we do in CORE, Congregations Organizing for Racial Reconciliation, is so important, particularly the caucusing that we do. So if you have gone, the door into the movement of building anti-racist churches is this Understanding Racism workshop. And once you've gone through that and you kind of learned the language and kind of at least know the definitions that we're using, you don't necessarily always have to agree with all of them, but you at least know them, so we're not fighting about definitions. We do these bi-monthly caucuses. And in those bi-monthly caucuses, we try to disrupt the ways that we've internalized racism. And I've been in this movement now we've all been in it. When was the first one? I keep forgetting. Has it been like 4 years, 3 years?
4 years, yeah.
So for 3 or 4 years, every other month with everybody, and then every other month just with my church, I've been meeting for what we call, like at our church, we call it AA for racists, where we confess our racism as white people. We do like internal reflection. This is not this is a Christian practice, right? Of confessing your sins to one another so that you might be healed.
Yeah.
And we look at the places where it's crazy. I am so sympathetic and all on board for this anti-racism movement. And I still end up like having racist thoughts and reactions. And this is like the chance to disrupt them. And if you haven't done intentional work like that, that I think is your first step for being a little like horrified and disgusted about your own racism. You don't stay there, okay? Like Jesus' grace saves you from that, both pardon and in reality, both imputation and importation for our Baptists amongst us. But, I mix some Wesleyan and Reformed Kung Fu theology there on y'all. But I think if I'm not careful, I will attempt to be an anti-racist in a racist way. How's that strike you guys? Is that, you have anything you want to add to that counsel, or you want to like say, Tom, that's a bunch of baloney, or stronger words?
You said, say that again. You said you think you would be racist in an anti-racist way?
You can attempt to be anti-racist in a racist way.
Flesh that out. So what does that look like for you?
Having all the answers. I mean, that's a very white thing to do, is to be like, I know what's right and you don't, and I'm going to tell you what's right.
But that could also be a man thing to do if you ask our wives.
Sure. I mean, there's an intersectionality of gender mixed in with that. but a white male thing in particular. I'm gonna white mansplain it to you.
Wow.
I'm gonna, yeah, I think there's some other resources there than just, and I'm gonna get to those in a minute. But that was my first counsel is just be careful. I mean, that's like that's one of the like Sermon on the Mount, right? Like watch out for the speck in your,
exactly. That's what I was thinking
log
about.
in your own eye.
That's right. Yeah. So if you were asking me that question, if you were asking that question to me and asking me to think about it, to be careful of my own racism when I'm dealing with racism, or as I'm addressing it, not to be to basically miss my own cultural blind spots. And I'm trying to process that, obviously, as a Black male in America, 21st century, and oftentimes men and women who look like me are the ones who are experiencing a lot of racism towards them. But if I was going to try to really think deeply and peel back some layers in my own heart, I'm probably very prejudiced when it comes to the police for the most part. Meaning when I get pulled over, which doesn't happen often, but when it does, I'm questioning why it happened. And then there are times where I see police like in my community or just dealing with other people from my community. And I begin to ask questions like, what are they doing? I'm very skeptical, as if they are probably over-policing all the time. And to some degree, if I'm be honest with myself and really like search my heart, I'm making some judgment calls without knowing anything of really what's going on. Only knowing one side of the story that is true, but it's not all that is true.
Mm-hmm. By the way, I love that people are answering your question, Coy, in the comments. So this is the great part about this whole format is that, if we were just in a room and the three of us were up front with microphones, you wouldn't get to hear what people were thinking in their heads, but you get to hear it in the comments here. But Aaron Umstead, who's just a dear woman in my church, says white people need to be humble. That's part of part of our white racist problem is the lack of humility. And you can come about anti-racist work with a lack of humility in there. Coy, it humbles me to hear you even be willing to empathize. You've done that before to be willing to empathize with police. So I wouldn't, how you disrupt your own internalization of racism as a Black man is in our caucuses, we spend time together, but then we also split off into a people of color caucus and a white caucus.
Yeah.
Because there's disruption of internalization that people of color need to do that white people need to be involved in.
Right.
And the people of color don't need to hear white people saying the racist, blankety blank stuff that comes to their mind in moments like that. That's not helpful to anybody except for white people to carry that burden themselves with it. Kurt, you got any thoughts on that judgment, judging yourself first?
No, that's good. I think, just having a broken and a contrite heart, I think you're right, though. I think the tools that I've learned to lead with, to lead in quotes, are these demonstrative, power, forceful metrics that aren't any virtues of the Spirit. So we can't lead out of that learned behavior. That's not how Jesus led. So, yeah.
All right. So my first counsel to somebody who's dealing with racist stuff that other people are saying is to spend some time making sure that you're disrupting your own internalization of racism. Here's my second suggestion, is to show the other person the grace that you show yourself when you see your own racism, or even when you don't see it. I think that we tend to want justice for others' transgressions and we want mercy for our own. And that's not just in racism, that's in everything. We want to frame our own misdemeanors and transgressions as positively as possible. and we tend to frame the other person's misdemeanors and transgressions and sin as negatively as possible. And this doesn't have to mean that you don't engage the racism. I think you do, but you do it the way that you do it with yourself. And again, let me just be really clear. Like, I think Coy's point is right. Like, I'm speaking as a white male right now. So I'm really kind of speaking to white men, maybe white people more generally. But this is why there's all of us on here. So Coy, you can fix everything I say for Black men and women. But I think this has a lot to do with the tone or the tenor or the manner or the method that you engage with, in which you go about it. You don't divorce yourself from yourself. You may at times, in fact, I think if you're a Christian, you have to have had moments where you are horrified and disgusted at the sin in your own life. Like you didn't even know, or you couldn't believe that you did that.
Yeah.
That's part of like when you measure yourself against the holiness of God and you find yourself like left wanting. But I think if you're a mature Christian, you understand that the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. It's not the end. The end is perfect love. It's a peace that passes understanding. And you show yourself a lot of love in the midst of that, at least if you're mature. Now, I know like a lot of people go to therapy to try to like show themselves some love. But the Christian value, I think, is to show yourself the love that you know you're worthy of because Jesus came to die for you.
Yeah.
That's how worthy of love you are. And that raises your own sense of like, in the midst of my brokenness and my things that horrify me and disgust me about myself, God loved me enough to send his only begotten son. And you want to see yourself change, but you also realize that change doesn't necessarily happen overnight, unless you're a really strict Wesleyan, like perfect perfection happens in an instant, but you're not that kind of Wesleyan. And Kurt, you're not even Wesleyans, you're Reformed.
No,
so
we're
you
not.
don't think perfection is even possible. So you know, you give yourself some grace. If you're Reformed, especially, give yourself a lot of grace for God's salvation. Wesleyans give ourselves less grace. Well, we actually give ourselves.
You catch that, Kurt? He said we are heathens. We sin a whole lot, but you know, grace covers it all.
Sometime we're gonna have to do a theological perspectives. But I think you hold inside of yourself a tension between being patient and impatient with yourself at the same time. Or you could say that you have a holy discontent with yourself. So I would suggest you show other people that same grace. Show them the same grace that you show yourself.
Yes.
It doesn't mean that you ignore it. It doesn't mean that you don't work like to be sanctified and grow in more maturity. But what's your reaction? I'm curious, comments as well. People comment and let us know how you're reacting to that.
Yeah, one thought, I have a bunch, but I think for the first time, and I'm learning, I'm getting it, but so many thoughts into the one. We're living in a culture, maybe it's just apparent to me for the first time, where grace is starting to become unpopular. Where grace almost seems like out of touch. That like, I mean, literally, it's like, it's true. Like time is up. You've had 400 years. Time is up. Like we demand it now, and amen to that. We should demand it now. Time is up. So I'm just naming that tension there. And so on one hand, that's what I'm trying to get. I'm trying to learn of like, gosh, it has been too long. How long, oh Lord? It's too long. We need now. We're just going to be passive. We can't be passive any longer. This is our moment. At the same time, we can't. If we throw out grace out of our theology, Lord have mercy on us.
Yes.
I mean, we're saved by grace through faith. I mean, I thank God for grace. So That's a tough one. So I'm resonating with kind of this group, maybe on the left, if you will, saying we need it now, and they're right. But what I don't want to lose is the Christian virtue of grace. We just can't lose that.
Yeah. In Ephesians chapter 5, Paul tells a husband to love his wife as he loves himself, because no one ever hurts himself or takes advantage of himself or does anything to damage himself. Why? Because usually a sane individual loves themselves, and we love ourselves more than anybody else. Now, we are oftentimes connected to certain people, parents, children, other relatives, friends, people that we have built relationships with, that we will apply grace because of the love that we have for them in their situation. So you can see two people committing the same crime or doing the same offensive thing. And in one sense, you can be disgusted because you don't know the person who was doing it in one area. And then in the other area, you know this person, and it is your love for them that causes you to apply grace over them. Okay.
Yeah.
And I think that in our country, and I think with people in period, we often will apply grace to those things that are like us, those things that are our preferences, those things that we have become familiar with or somehow connected to. And so we don't see it the same way. We see it as, well, this was different. You know, it was my son, Billy, who did X, Y, and Z. So it's not as bad as when your son, Tyrone, did it. And the reality of it is all we're really doing is we're just seeing through the eyes of grace because we have a connection or a relationship with someone or something or a group of individuals. And that happens whether it be the denomination I'm a part of, the job I work at, heck, the political party I'm a part of. And so, you know, there are some people who won't drive a Ford because, you know, their family was all GM, you know, and there are some people who, I'm not going to drive a foreign car because I'm an American. And there are, regardless to the right or the left, people who are on the one side or the other politically, even when your side is wrong, you will act like, no, there's a reason why they did that. And you make excuses for bad behavior. And so, I think we often tend to apply grace to ourselves and those we're connected to. And we kind of layer this layer of love over it with the grace. And then when there's somebody else, we're like, no, we see it for what it really is.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And just one more thought too is we don't divorce grace from justice either. So it's not one or the other, it's always both.
Yeah. And somebody commented, how do we find that balance? I think you find that balance in God's law as well as God's love, because both exist. God is a holy God, he's righteous, but he's a gracious God, he's merciful, and he doesn't want anyone to perish. And so the reality of it is there is this fine line, and we lean on the Lord and the Holy Spirit to help us navigate through, hey, when do we show grace and how much grace in this situation? And when do we more so exercise a sense of, we want it right now, like you said, Kurt. The iron is hot and we want it now. We're tired of waiting. It's been 400 plus years and people think it's better. But what we're realizing is we've just kind of masked what was really going on with different laws or different opportunities or different phenomena that are taking place. You know, look what Black men can do today. They can be multimillionaires and play sports, and look at our country and how far it's gone. And in actual reality, in some sense, we still have some of the same uncivilized practices that we had 300 or 400 years ago. We just covered them up and called them something different.
Yeah.
Yep.
So here's my third piece of counsel on talking politics and race, or politics when race is involved, which, let's be honest, like, what part of politics is race not involved? Is I would recommend that you turn on your inner journalist with the person that you are talking to. So I want to be like clear, like I'm talking about like, how do you I'm not talking about how you necessarily talk to a lawmaker. I'm talking about how you talk to your family members, like the people that you are wrestling with, how to be in relationship with these people, your siblings, your friends, your coworkers. Like how do you interact with them? And I'd say turn on your inner journalist and ask lots of questions. Now here's what I see: two extremes when it comes to the way that we engage. On the one extreme, we don't engage, and that's a classic white thing. Like, you hear something racist, you see something racist, You see something, you don't say something.
You
That's
see something?
that's white. Like that's a very white thing to do. But the other extreme, I call it like the pile up. And this is where like someone, I see this on my Facebook page on a fairly regular basis when I post something. And like someone who's generally a pretty good person, like a person of goodwill, who's not necessarily trying to say something racist, says something racist.
Yeah.
And there's a pile up on them of all of my progressive friends. And that person never comes back into the conversation. We have just like freaked them out. And I don't think that that did anything significant for the work of anti-racism.
Yeah.
Right.
And so we come out like full. This is where I feel like I see a lot of like for people who are probably the people who are listening to this or watching this or wanting to be anti-racist, they come out like full guns blazing. Like you said, Kurt, declarative, you're racist, that's racism, like whatever else, you can stats, you can throw at somebody.
Yeah.
And they tell the person just how racist all of that is, the policies, the ideas, whatever they support. But here's my Dr. Phil question for you. How's that working?
Right.
Is that changing any of your friends or family's minds? Is this is not a matter of like end goals. It's a matter of like methodology and strategy. Is it being effective? Now, if you have a pattern, a history of coming out full guns blazing, and you have people like saying, oh my gosh, Kurt, I never thought of that before. You're totally right. I'm a racist. And that's a racist idea. Let me change my mind. Then by all means, come out full guns blazing. But if you don't have any like track record of changing anybody's mind with that method, and again, I'm not talking about like talking to your lawmakers and stuff. I'm talking about talking to people that you're trying to have a day-to-day relationship with, or like, some kind of family or friendship relationship with. How's that working for you? So I say this from experience. The people in the moments that have changed me in these situations have been people who have been firm in asking hard questions, but have done so lovingly and graciously and been amazingly patient with me. Like it humbles me. I mean, I'm seeing even like some people in the comments here who are dearly beloved of mine, who have been patient with me coming along in this issue and other issues. And that's how I've experienced transformation. I'm one guy, right? I'm one white dude. Now this is admittedly easier for me to say as a white dude, because in these conversations, I'm not personally threatened by it. I'm not personally, like, it's not personally impacting me. I'm at the top of the privilege ladder. By the way, because it's Indigenous Peoples Day, I've learned recently not to say at the top of the totem pole, because the totem pole doesn't have that original like hierarchical understanding. That's a white like framework on top of the totem pole. So I've started saying the ladder of privilege rather than at the top of the totem pole. So now, by the way, that wasn't like somebody coming at me guns blazing, like telling me how bad the totem pole metaphor was. That was somebody like with me saying, I wonder if that's racist. Like they, and then we did some like research on it. Turns out it is. But I think if we pile on somebody and we shut them down, we may have won the battle, but lost the war for their heart, for their soul, and possibly for our nation, and for real spiritual transformation. I think judgmentalism and legalism, they're toxic and they're destructive, whatever side of the political spectrum that you find them on. I mean, you can find it on the left, you can find it on the right.
Yeah.
So you asked, how is this working for me? So of course my approach is probably a little bit different than you all's approach would be, being a black male to white male.
Right.
And I think for me, I try to find a way to connect with the person that I'm talking to and somehow put my experience into their experience, or somehow put my world into their world by somehow trying to build a bridge or connect to something that is valuable or important to them, then connect with regards to me. That's what I usually do. And I can say that it oftentimes will work from the standpoint of usually the person doesn't get as riled up. So I was talking to a gentleman, he's really strong Christian, and he's very conservative and he's very open about that. And he was talking about, he asked me how I felt about with John MacArthur, what was happening out in California, with what, you know, the government and stuff was doing in the state, with the fact he was trying to have church and they wouldn't let him use a parking lot and on and on and on. And I said, well, so he probably kind of brought it upon himself. Right? And so the gentleman was like, what do you mean? I mean, he's just trying to have church and yada, yada, yada. I said, well, probably due to his name, due to the size of his church, and due to the fact that he probably made a public statement that they were going to continue to meet. That probably got the state's attention, and then they reacted. And so then the gentleman, he carried on with, it's our constitutional right. We have the right to meet, and the assembly, they're taking away our religious freedom. And I said, are they really? I mean, they kind of just asked us for the sake of what's going on and with COVID, trying to figure it out, just to not meet. They haven't told us we can't meet indefinitely or permanently. They're just saying right now, take some precautions like everybody else. I said, so I don't know that they're really imposing on our religious right by asking us not to meet. They haven't created no law mandating that we can't meet. It's just, you kind of got to help everybody out. We all taking one for the team. He said, well, yeah, I guess you're right. He said, but still, I said, not to mention, at the end of the day, at some point, they are going to take away our right to meet and our right to have our freedom of expression and worship. Like, that's going to happen. He said, well, I know because the Bible says that. So why are you fighting it so hard? So in this moment, I'm just simply asking him questions that we both know biblically. And instead of me getting all riled up and trying to, give my emotional argument or even my philosophical thought, it's just let's just look at some Bible verses. So that's what I've done with a Christian. My wife reminded me of a story one time. We were in a small group at a church that was predominantly white, and one of the wives, we were in a small group setting, said, my daughter saw one of the cutest little colored boys, and my wife and I were the only black couple in the whole group, and we were like, huh? What'd she just say?
Right,
and so
man.
my wife, gently, because we were friends, she said, hey, you shouldn't call black people colored. Like, you don't refer like colored boy. You don't do that. This was, of course, before the term people of color became more politically correct. And while people of color is okay to use these days, colored boy, and she said it in innocence. She didn't know it was wrong, or she didn't know it sounded very racist. And so my wife gently, lovingly helped her realize you probably don't want to say that ever. Not even just around,
ever.
We're here, we're black, but ever. Like, you want to stop that and don't say it anymore. So,
cut it out.
In both those situations, maybe it's sometimes easier for me and my wife because those types of terms or sometimes those experiences, we are the ones who would be mostly offended by it, and we can remain unoffended and try to help the other person see like, then that usually works.
Now let me, as you're saying this, there's something that is striking me about the inadequacy of my own answer. And that is that I will say that there have been very transformative moments for me and for people around me when someone who is black has let down the mask and allowed the pathos of racism to be expressed, but not at someone exactly, but at the challenge of the whole thing.
Yeah.
And when you it's hard to disregard that. So this is where a little bit, I remember Coy, like I said to you at one point, I think one of my white tendencies is to say, all right, everybody let's stay calm about this. Let's not get too worked up. And I don't want to say like, let's not get passionate or show emotion.
Yeah.
Right.
It's a very white thing to say,
Yes.
let's not get too excited about this. Everybody stay
Right.
calm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is a white thing.
I don't want to say that. I don't want to say that's not what I'm trying to imply here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think what's remarkable about what you were saying, Coy, is I don't know if that was in a group setting. It sounded like it was, but I think the other thing that's sad is then you had to you were the only ones there that had the language and the wherewithal to say that is racist. It's too bad that, someone else didn't call out, a white person didn't call out the other white person and be like, wow, it's just, that's an example of that extra pressure that's often on people of color.
That's a really great point, Kurt, because while Coy and Keturah may have been the only Black people in the room, they weren't the only people who could point out.
Right.
Exactly.
But this is where, so like, I think about a family member who one time said something very racist. And I just jumped on them. I said, that is racist. And like, don't say that again in front of my kids.
Mm.
That's what I said. And you know what it did? The conversation ended. There was no, and later on, I had to come back to that family member and say, listen, I'm really sorry. I got really judgmental with you. And I'd like to apologize for that. And the person actually said to me, you know what, that was racist, what I said. And I don't know why I said it. But it was only in the coming back and the softening of my own heart.
Yeah.
The person was willing to soften their heart. And that, I mean, confession, this is like something I teach about confession. I think confession leads to confession. When you want to take ownership of whatever percentage of, the wrong that you had, it softens hearts.
It does.
That's missing in our method right now. Which is why I started with think about your own racism first. So,
yeah.
But with that, Tom, I think it's good that you went back to them and said, hey, I don't know. I'm struggling though with if you should have apologized, because particularly when it's involving your kids, that might have been one of those solidifying identity moments of your kids of like, we're anti-racist kids. Because I remember when Uncle Bob said something, hey, my dad put up with a lot of crap, but he put up with that racial stuff. And so I think what's beautiful is your softness of going back to them. And I'm not saying how you did it was perfect. But maybe like, hey, I really like to, maybe I apologize for how, I don't know. I'm not sure. But I think that's a bridge building for Christians, white Christians particularly. Those are bridge building moments to kind of, stick up for people of color, or even if they're not present.
I think I could have said, yeah, there were no people of color in the room, but I think I could have like led off with, tell me why you say that.
Yeah, that's true.
Let's
that's
talk
good.
about that.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that at some point in the conversation, I couldn't said, I think that ends up in racist, inequitable outcomes, because racism is ultimately about inequitable outcomes.
Yeah.
And I could have gotten there. But they were just.
Well, here's the thing. You did get there though.
I did.
You got there. And I think that goes back to what Kurt is saying. I mean, I think that it's good that we ponder our hearts. We question, or we ask ourselves, hey, could we have had a different approach? And maybe for the next person your approach will be different, but maybe in that situation, that's exactly what your relative needed. It's okay to at times be firm because I'm frustrated, and then make a decision to show you my firmness, even in my frustration. What we don't want to do is sin. Jesus says, be
angry, but don't
also
sin.
be
Yeah.
angry and don't sin. Anger is a legitimate emotion. It is not anything that is sinful to get angry. It's what you do with that anger. And the same thing that God told Cain. He said, listen, if you don't master that anger, it's crouching at the door. Sin is crouching at the door to take over you. So, different stroke for different folks. Sometimes you're firm. That is absolutely racist. What's wrong with you? Other times you're like, hey, tell me why you say that. And I know because my wife and I, we do that all the time. When somebody does something that she thinks is racist or bad, I was like, hey, baby, one time we were in the bank. Some woman did something, said something crazy to our kids. I told her kid she didn't want her kid to play with ours because their parents weren't around. And I don't know what type of kids they are. Man, my daughter came and told my wife, let's just go. My wife was like, no. Man, she marched right back into that bank and told that woman, you have no idea whose kids you was talking about. My husband and I were doing business right over there. This is the kids' play area. You need to watch your mouth because the next time somebody might not be so nice. They might slap you upside your head or something. And I'm like, oh, goodness. Oh, I'm just standing there like, and we can argue, talk back and forth whether or not my wife did it the right way or not. She was firm. She was just like, do not talk about my kids and their parents like while they're sitting there. You're trying to act like something is wrong with what they're doing and what their parents are doing. So my wife was like, and we were close to the Grand Ledge too. So we don't usually visit that branch of the bank anymore.
So I want to qualify what I'm saying again, and just remind people, like, I'm trying to talk to somebody who says my family member disgusts me and horrifies me.
Right.
And that's a relationship you're trying to maintain. I think.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Admittedly,
absolutely.
Some family members can be so toxic that you need to stop maintaining that relationship. I mean, but I've even encountered this in spouses, and presumably short of like sexual infidelity or physical abuse. I'm not going to counsel a couple to separate yourself, but I don't know. Now that I just said that, I don't know, but opened up a whole can of
Yes,
worms.
you did. Yes,
Why did I even go there?
I don't know.
All right.
Somebody need to hit the mute button on
Hey,
me.
just keep talking. Just roll past it. Go with the thunder.
You know what I like to do? I like to scroll back up in the comments section, and because I don't know like what we were saying back then, I just like to pretend that like when Katura writes exactly with exclamation marks, that was something brilliant that I said. So 'cause I don't really know what anybody was saying when she said that.
Oh man.
All right. We've been talking for an hour or so.
Yep. It's that time.
I've loved the conversation in the comments. I love this platform. I think it's so cool. As far as like people getting to comment while we're talking, and this is like what every preacher wants, is to be able to know what people are thinking while they're talking. In a black church, they say it out loud, but
right, we know what you're thinking.
In white churches, they set up a meeting with you.
White churches with people with masks on, so now I can't read facial expressions either. So it's like, man, it's real. I have one final thought to all this, and I think about it just like evangelism. You might meet the most staunch racist person, and you might develop a relationship with them, and maybe it's a year, maybe it's 2 years, and based on that relationship, there's moments where you might be able to move them from a -10 to a -7. And that's where you let them go and they move away. And some other Christian might be able to take them from a -7 to a -4. And our hope, right, is that they accept Jesus, that they, that he's the Lord of their life. And I think it's the same with anti-racism. And so as a white male, as a person that our church is majority white, I know a lot of -4s, a lot of -3s. And it is like the calling God's put in my life. to get to 0, get them to 1, get them to 2. And then sometimes, just like knowledge can puff up theologically, when you get a lot of positive 10s, those positive 10 anti-racists can be very, very arrogant. It doesn't have to be, but that arrogance, that knowledge can puff up. And so,
I love that idea. I love like taking Paul's idea of like, Apollos planted and
some
watered, and you got to see the fruit of it. And I think that's an appropriate way to think about the work of anti-racism. You might not see and you hold that tension of being impatient and patient, like a holy discontent. Moment, and you let God be the one who's ultimately about changing hearts.
Exactly.
I think we're not talking policy tonight, right? Like, we're talking about relationships with people that we are trying to maintain a relationship with. If we were having a policy conversation about how to change policy, that'd be a very different conversation, like in council. I'm trying to be a pastor to people who don't like the racism they see in their family members when they talk politics with them. So, all right, before y'all who are watching sign off or leave, be sure to like our core Facebook page. You can keep up to date with the growing movement of anti-racist churches in the Lansing region. This is the 9th episode. We've done 9 of them. 9th episode of Perspectives, and you can find the other 8, the first 8, as well as short takes on the core Facebook page. We are planning for at least one more of these on Monday nights, politics and race episodes next Monday. We'll see where it goes from there. We may go up to the election. We may not. We'll see. But Pastor Coy is going to lead us in a conversation about, I'm going to hit the Coy button. What's it about, Coy?
Biblical principles in politics.
Whoa. You want to give us a little teaser about that, or you want to
Well, I will tell you this much. It all started, I was talking to a very good friend of mine who's a pastor, who shared with me that if I were look at the policies, both RNC and DNC, what I would see is that the RNC and their policies line up more biblically than the DNC. And frustrated by that statement, I decided, you know what, I'm going to do it. And I thought actually they might be right. But what I found was hypocrisy. Lots of it. Let's talk about it next week.
Oh, there we go. That's going to be our short take right there. That'll be our teaser for next week. Oh, so we will see you next Monday night at 8 p.m. Friends, until then, be good or be well, and hopefully do some good.